ChatGPT. It's everywhere you look these days, right? And it seems like everyone's talking about it, using it, wondering about it. But how much do we really understand about what makes it tick?
That's what we're here to find out.
Exactly. We're going deep on this one, folks. And to help us unpack it all, we're turning to a real AI heavyweight, Stephen Wolfram.
Oh, yeah, he's a legend.
For good reason. The guy's been thinking about this stuff for decades. In fact, he wrote a whole paper about ChatGPT, dissecting it, analyzing it.
It's a fascinating read. Gets pretty complex pretty quickly, though.
Well, that's why we have you here, to break it all down for us. So, what's the core idea? How does Wolfram explain what ChatGPT is actually doing?
Well, he starts off with a really interesting point. At its heart, ChatGPT just wants to write a reasonable continuation of any text you give it. Like, imagine someone who's read billions of pages, every book imaginable.
Okay, I'm picturing a giant library, stacks and stacks of books.
Exactly. And ChatGPT is trying to sound plausible, trying to fit in based on this vast knowledge it's absorbed.
So it's like that friend who always knows the perfect thing to say in any conversation. But how does it actually pull that off? How can a machine even begin to grasp language like that?
That's where things get really mind-blowing. You see, ChatGPT doesn't process text the way we do. It doesn't see individual words all strung together. Instead, it creates what Wolfram calls a meaning map, a map based on those billions of words it's learned.
A meaning map. Okay, now you've got my attention.
Imagine a map where words that frequently appear together in similar contexts are clustered near each other, like king, queen, and throne might all be grouped together.
So it's like ChatGPT is building its own internal vocabulary map, but the words are grouped by their relationships to each other, not just their dictionary definitions.
You got it. It's almost like ChatGPT sees constellations of words, and it jumps between them based on what it's learned about how they relate. And get this, it writes one word at a time, always calculating the most likely next word based on this map.
Wait, so it's not planning out entire sentences in advance, it's making it up as it goes along.
Kind of, but it's doing it based on this incredibly detailed map of language it's built from all that text. Wolfram compares it to those choose-your-own-adventure books.
I loved those books growing up. So it's like at each step, ChatGPT is picking the most exciting or the most logical path based on where it's been and what it knows about language.
Exactly. And what's even wilder is that sometimes picking a less likely word, a less obvious choice, actually makes the text sound more creative, less robotic. It's like it's learning to be unpredictable, just like a good writer.
Okay, that is seriously cool.
Okay.
But I gotta ask, where do these probabilities come from? How can a machine learn the rules of writing, let alone the nuances of what makes writing good?
It all boils down to a numbers game, believe it or not. Remember those word constellations on ChatGPT's meaning map?
Yeah, those clusters of related words.
Right. Well, those are formed by analyzing billions of words, figuring out which ones tend to pop up together in different contexts.
So basically, it's stalking our language patterns on a massive scale, like some sort of linguistic detective.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that Wolfram actually breaks down how these probabilities are calculated step by step. Starts out simple, just like predicting letters. QU is way more likely than QZ, right?
Makes sense.
Then it goes from there, predicting words, then pairs of words, always building upon those initial probabilities and refining them based on the patterns it finds.
So it's like learning to talk, but on hyperdrive. First you learn letters, then words, then how those words go together.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT is doing it at warp speed with this massive data set.
Precisely. And by crunching through all that data, ChatGPT has managed to pick up on these subtle patterns in how we use language, patterns that we might not even realize are there. It's almost like it's uncovering a secret code, a hidden structure beneath the words themselves.
That's incredible, but it also makes me wonder, if it can learn the patterns of language, what else could it learn?
That's the question a lot of researchers are asking. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's dig deeper into how this learning actually happens. It's not just about memorizing words, it's about building a model of language itself.
A model? Now you've really piqued my curiosity. This deep dive is already full of surprises. A model of language. Okay, you're gonna have to break that one down for me.
Sure, it's actually a really powerful idea. Think of it like this. A model is basically a simplified way to represent something much more complex. Like a map isn't the real world, but it's super useful because it helps us understand where things are, how to get around.
Okay, so I get the map analogy. So you're saying ChatGPT is using a model, a kind of map, of language itself.
Exactly. And just like we have all kinds of maps for different purposes, road maps, topographical maps, those old nautical charts, well, there are all sorts of different models too. ChatGPT uses a particularly complex one called a neural network.
A neural network. Now that rings a bell. That's all about trying to mimic how the human brain works.
Right. You got it. It's inspired by the way the brain is structured, with all those interconnected neurons. Imagine each neuron on its own is pretty simple, right? It takes in a little bit of information and then sends out a signal based on what it receives.
Right, like a little messenger passing along information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But when you connect billions of these simple units together, suddenly,
You've got something really powerful. Kind of like how a single ant might not seem that impressive, but a whole colony working together can achieve some pretty amazing things.
that's a great analogy. And in ChatGPT's neural network, those interconnected neurons allow it to learn patterns in language, relationships between words, in a way that a traditional computer program just couldn't handle.
So it's not just memorizing definitions, it's actually understanding how words and ideas connect, kind of like how our brains do it.
Exactly. Though it's important to keep in mind that while ChatGPT's learning is inspired by the brain, it's not a perfect replica. In fact, it's actually a lot less efficient in some ways.
Oh, interesting. So there's still room for improvement.
Oh, absolutely. Tons of room for improvement. That's actually a whole area of really active research right now, how to make these neural networks learn more efficiently, more like the human brain.
I bet. That stuff is way over my head, but it's fascinating to think about. But for now, let's stick with how ChatGPT learns the way it does now. You mentioned something called machine learning earlier.
Yes. So essentially, we train ChatGPT by feeding it massive amounts of text data. Remember those billions of pages we were talking about?
Oh, right. So it's back to devouring all those books.
Yeah.
But this time, it's not just reading for fun. It's actually building up its model, its map of language, with each word it processes.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really cool. As it's processing this data, the network is constantly adjusting those connections between the neurons, strengthening some, weakening others. It's almost like fine-tuning a musical instrument, making tiny adjustments to get the sound just right.
Wow. So it's like we're teaching a machine to find its voice, to express itself, but instead of giving it vocal lessons, we're feeding it all of human knowledge, or at least all the human knowledge we've written down.
That's a great way to put it. And the thing is, it's not just about the amount of data, it's also about the way it's trained. Even exposing the network to the same text, but with slight variations, can dramatically improve its ability to learn to generalize.
So it's like showing a child different pictures of a cat. A fluffy cat, a skinny cat, a cat curled up sleeping. Each different cat helps the child build a more complete picture in their mind of what makes a cat a cat.
That's a fantastic analogy. The training process is incredibly nuanced, really a testament to how creative and clever the people who develop these techniques are. But as impressive as all this is, we do have to remember
That it's not magic. Yeah.
exactly. As amazing as ChatGPT is, there are limits to what it can do.
Okay, so ChatGPT isn't magic. There are limits. What kind of limits? What are we talking about here? Okay, so ChatGPT isn't magic. There are limits. What kind of limits? What are we talking about here?
Well, to understand that, we need to get into this idea Wolfram calls computational irreducibility.
Okay, now you're using the big words. Break that down for me. What is computational irreducibility?
Basically, it means that some problems, you just can't solve them with shortcuts. It doesn't matter how much data you have, how smart your algorithms are.
Interesting. So it's not just about ChatGPT needing more information. It's that some things are just inherently unpredictable.
Exactly. It's like, imagine trying to predict, say, how the weather's going to change. You can analyze past weather patterns, gather tons of data, but
You
sometimes...
just have to wait and see what happens.
Exactly. There's no way to know for sure what the weather will be like tomorrow, except to let time pass and observe it.
So you can't always predict the future just by looking at the past. Sometimes you need to actually run the experiment in real time.
Right. And some systems, they're just so complex, there are so many variables interacting that there's no shortcut.
So where does that leave ChatGPT? Is it just out of luck when it comes to these super complex systems?
Well, in its current form, ChatGPT is really good at spying patterns in the data it's been fed. But those patterns are based on what's happened in the past, right? And if those patterns are based on systems that are computationally irreducible, think like weather patterns, the stock market, if ChatGPT will hit a wall. It can only work with the information it has access to, and some things are just inherently unpredictable.
Makes sense. It's like you can lead ChatGPT for water, but you can't make it predict the weather.
Yeah.
But even with these limitations, we're still talking about something pretty remarkable, right? I mean, this thing can generate human-quality text.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this whole field so exciting to me. Even with the limitations, ChatGPT has made a huge breakthrough. Think about it. It's like it's uncovered this hidden code, a set of rules about how ideas connect in language. Wolfram calls it semantic grammar.
Semantic grammar. Okay, that's a new one.
Yeah, so it's like, you know how regular grammar, it dictates how words are structured in sentences? Well, semantic grammar, it's like a deeper level. It governs the flow of meaning.
So ChatGPT has learned not just how to string words together, but how to make those words actually mean something, how to tell a story, how to get a point across.
Exactly. It's figured out this unwritten rule book for how we connect thoughts and ideas, and that's what allows it to create text that doesn't just sound good grammatically, but also actually makes sense.
That's pretty amazing. It's like ChatGPT is holding up a mirror to language itself, showing us something we didn't even know was there.
That's a great way to put it, and that's what's so exciting. This whole field is just in its infancy, but it has the potential to totally change how we think about, well, thinking, how we teach language, develop AI. It's really incredible.
Wow, that's a lot to process. So ChatGPT, it's more than just a fancy chatbot. It's a window into the mind, maybe even our own minds.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up for today, but I want to leave you with a question, something to ponder. If a machine, even one as sophisticated as ChatGPT, can generate human-quality text, if it can uncover these hidden structures in how we communicate, what does that say about language itself? Is it more complex than we ever imagined? Or perhaps simpler? Food for thought. Until next time, keep asking those big questions and we'll keep diving deep to find the answers.